You're sitting still. Nothing is wrong. You have food, shelter, safety. Everything your ancestors spent their entire lives fighting for. And yet something inside you is screaming. It's not pain. It's not fear. It's something quieter and somehow worse. It's boredom. And the fact that you feel it at all might be one of the most dangerous things that ever happened to the human species. Here's what nobody tells you. Boredom is not a modern inconvenience. It is not a side effect of smartphones or slow internet or a bad afternoon. It is a force so ancient and so powerful that researchers now believe it may be responsible for nearly everything that defines your civilization, your art, your violence, your religion, your wars, and possibly your extinction. You were not built to be still. Every cell in your body carries a memory of motion. For roughly 2 million years, your ancestors moved. They tracked animals across open plains. They foraged. They migrated. They built. They fled. The human body evolved for a world of constant necessary action. Rest was a reward. Stillness meant you were hiding, healing, or already dead. Then something changed. Around 12,000 years ago, your ancestors discovered farming. They stopped following the food and started growing it. For the first time in human history, there were hours in the day with nothing urgent to fill them. And that, according to anthropologist Peter Richardson at the University of California, Davis, is when boredom was effectively born. Not as a feeling, as a crisis. Your brain, the same brain that once kept you alive on the savannah, had no category for purposeless downtime. It was wired for threat detection, pattern recognition, and problem solving. Give it nothing to solve, and it doesn't go quiet. It generates its own problems. It manufactures urgency out of nothing because the alternative, true stillness, feels to your ancient nervous system like the moment before something kills you. Psychologist John Eastwood at York University has spent years studying what he calls the core experience of boredom, and what he found is unsettling. Boredom isn't an absence of stimulation. It's a failure of meaning. Your brain is not understimulated when you're bored. It is screaming for something to attach to. It wants purpose. It wants consequence. And when it can't find either, it begins to self-destruct. In study after study, people placed in unstimulating environments don't relax. They generate anxiety. They replay negative memories. They become irritable, reckless, or impulsive. In one striking experiment, participants were given a choice: sit alone in a quiet room for 15 minutes doing nothing, or press a button that would deliver a mild electric shock to themselves. Over 60% of men chose the shock. They chose physical pain over the discomfort of their own silent minds. Let that sit for a moment. Your brain would rather hurt itself than be bored. Now scale that impulse across 12,000 years of human civilization, and you begin to see the shape of what boredom has actually built and destroyed. Look at the historical record. Anthropologists studying pre-agricultural societies consistently find low rates of interpersonal violence, no large-scale warfare, and relatively stable social structures. Not because ancient hunter-gatherers were noble or peaceful by nature, but because they were busy. Every hour of every day had purpose: food, safety, shelter, community. There was no idle time for grievance to calcify into conflict. Then agriculture created surplus. Surplus created leisure. Leisure created boredom. And boredom, when experienced collectively by thousands of people living in close proximity, became something historians are only beginning to understand as a genuine driver of civilizational violence. Historian Barbara Tuchman, in her landmark analysis of medieval warfare, observed that many of the most catastrophic military campaigns in European history were not driven by scarcity or survival. They were driven by restlessness. Nobles and soldiers who had no immediate existential threat to manage began manufacturing one. War was not just politics. War was stimulation. War was the cure for a civilization that didn't know it was bored. This is not ancient history. This is the wiring you are still running. When neuroscientist Mary Helen Imordino-Yang at the University of Southern California studies the resting brain, the brain that isn't doing anything, she finds something remarkable. The default mode network, the system that activates when you're not focused on an external task, is one of the most metabolically expensive regions in your brain. It is never truly idle. It is churning through identity, moral reasoning, future simulation, and social modeling. It is building your sense of self. And when you interrupt that process, when you force the default mode network into constant distraction, constant stimulation, constant scrolling, it doesn't develop properly. The capacity for deep reflection, for sitting with discomfort, for generating original thought from stillness, it atrophies. This is what makes boredom so paradoxical. You flee from it, but it is the state your brain needs most to function at its highest level. The greatest ideas in human history were not born in the midst of busyness. Newton didn't formulate the laws of gravity while attending meetings. Darwin didn't develop the theory of evolution while answering messages. The conditions that generated those breakthroughs were long, unstructured, uncertain stretches of time, what modern people would immediately identify as boredom, in which an active, unanchored mind was forced to find its own connections. Psychologist Sandi Mann at the University of Central Lancashire ran experiments where participants were asked to complete a boring task, copying numbers from a phone book, before attempting a creative challenge. The bored participants consistently outperformed the control group, not slightly, significantly. Boredom, it turns out, is a creativity engine. It forces your brain to generate its own stimulation, and in that generation, something new can emerge. But here's the problem. You live in a world that has declared war on boredom. Every second of potential stillness has been colonized by a notification, a feed, a stream, a recommendation. The average adult in the developed world now picks up their phone over 2,000 times per day. Not because they need information, but because the mind reaches automatically for anything that isn't the discomfort of having nothing to reach for. You are not addicted to your phone. You are addicted to the relief from boredom that your phone provides. And that distinction matters enormously because it means the problem was never technology. Technology simply gave your ancient, restless, meaning-hungry brain a new way to avoid the feeling that has shadowed your species since the first farmer looked at the sky and wondered what to do until tomorrow. The danger isn't boredom itself. The danger is what happens when a species that evolved to convert boredom into survival behavior, into hunting, building, migrating, creating, starts converting it instead into outrage, compulsion, tribalism, and spectacle. Because your brain doesn't care what it uses boredom's energy for. It doesn't ask whether the problem is real or manufactured. It doesn't distinguish between running from a predator and scrolling through a feed of manufactured crises. It just needs something to do. It just needs to move. And a civilization of minds that never learned to sit with stillness, that never developed the tolerance for the discomfort of their own unoccupied attention, is a civilization that will always be searching for the next thing to hunt, even when there is nothing left to hunt. There is a reason monks train for years to sit still. There is a reason meditation is described in almost every wisdom tradition as a discipline, not a relaxation, but a practice, requiring effort, requiring tolerance for discomfort, requiring the ability to let the screaming mind scream without answering it. It is hard precisely because you were not built for it. You were built for motion, for consequence, for urgency. But the world your ancestors built, the world of surplus, of safety, of relative comfort, requires something your evolutionary history did not prepare you for: the ability to be still and remain sane. So the next time you feel it, that restless, crawling, purposeless itch for something, anything, to fill the silence, you're not failing at modern life. You are experiencing the oldest tension in the human story, the gap between the creature you are and the world you built. 2 million years of urgency, 12,000 years of wondering what to do with the afternoon, and somewhere in that gap, everything you have ever made, destroyed, worshipped, and feared was born. You're still sitting still. Nothing is wrong. And something inside you is still screaming. Now you know why.